will not invest in those critical public services, but will give all of the money to, you know, tax cuts for landlords that do a lot of that support work, like change makers and voiceofaroha. Quite a few active organisations, connected communities that where like people are talking to each other and supporting each other is probably the big thing.
Kia ora everyone, and welcome to Voiceofaroha, Wellington Access Radio 106.1 FM. Don't forget to follow us on all our social medias to keep up with all the awesome mahi we're doing. My name is Aarti and I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts Rata and Oscar. How are you guys today?
Kia ora.
Yeah?
I'm super keen for this kōrero today.
Me too. How are you, Rata?
I'm fabulous. It's really lovely to talk to you guys, and I'm also very, very excited for our fantastic guest today. So, I'm doing really well.
Awesome.
Very, very happy to be here.
Well, we're very lucky because we are joined by a very special guest today. We have our very own MP for Wellington Central, Tamatha Paul. Kia ora, Tamatha. Welcome to the studio.
Kia ora. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's been a pretty busy day, lots going on, lots of community organising, but feeling good, feeling energised.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, could you please, you're very well known, but for those who may not know you, could you please give us a bit of introduction on who you are and some of your mahi, and
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you for having me on your podcast. So to people that I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name's Tam. I'm here tēnei no Ngāti Awa Waikato Tainui hoki. And I am lucky enough to be the local MP here in Wellington Central, like you just said. So get to represent our beautiful capital city of Pōneke in Parliament every single day, basically. I'm in the Green Party, which basically tells you a little bit about what I value and believe in, which is, put simply, a livable planet and justice for people. So people and planet is our main focus. Within the party, I get the privilege again to represent us on specific issues, but particularly for me, my focus is around housing. And also in the justice space. So I do a lot of mahi with prisons and police and corrections and our justice system to try and make it fairer, because it is pretty broken and isn't serving anybody well. So and then I also get to represent young people as the youngest MP within the Green Party, and it's another cool aspect of my mahi is the work of rangatahi. So very busy.
I can imagine.
But, you know, we're getting there, and it's a real privilege to be able to wake up every morning and kind of decide where to place that energy, particularly at the moment with the government that we have and the things that are happening in our country. So, I guess that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come and talk to us today. We're so lucky to have you here, and so thank you for being here. Could you tell us a bit about what inspired your politics journey, and how has that influenced your path to get to where you are right now?
Yeah, big question. I would definitely say my upbringing has shaped the way that I see politics and see the world and see the things that I want to change about the world. So I grew up in a small town in the Waikato called Tokoroa, and it's your classic working class town. Most of the people in that town are Māori or Pacifica, or we've got a big Filipino community. It's a big diverse community in Tokoroa, and a lot of the people in our town work at the mill, the paper mill in Tokoroa, and that's where I grew up, and that's probably where I got that sense of I guess class consciousness, but also pride in where I come from, pride in being Māori, pride in just our community in general, and also I guess a lot of suspicion of the government, and just always looking at, you know, who makes these decisions? Why are things the way that they are? Where does the power lie? So I've always just been quite curious about that. Just being a bit of a hoha, really, and being like, you know, why are things the way that they are? Why is it that there's these men in suits in Wellington that get to call all the shots, you know?
With enormous ramifications, that impact way more than just them.
Yeah, totally. And I guess just growing up and seeing the local council were kind of missing in action, and our local MP was missing in action, and I was just like, well, who makes the decisions around here, and why is it that our community was so neglected? And you know, we didn't see politicians showing up and trying to find solutions to the issues that our community was facing. So that's kind of what sparked my interest in Wellington and in politics, is just a curiosity about why things are the way they are. And then obviously found my way down here. And as we all know, like, it's hard to live in Wellington, the capital city of our country, and not be political. Not necessarily like on a party level. Just that I feel like we're very opinionated and we have very strong values.
Definitely.
And so...
That's one of the things I love about. That's one of the things I love about Wellington. That it kind of gives you permission to be yourself in some ways, and you kind of have to forge or find that identity, but you can kind of claim that space in Wellington, and in a way that's, say, different to Auckland. I think like Auckland's way more like top button up about that sort of thing.
Corporate, like not to like bash them or anything, but like
we need that as well. But I love how Wellington's got a kind of creative flair that lets you be who you are. Kind of be genuine to that.
That's definitely something I've heard heaps, like, from people who have moved here, is like they see Wellington as a safe place to be themselves, like whether they're from like the Rainbow or Takatapui community or other communities that, you know, face, you know, significant oppression, but particularly in some of like your small towns or where there's a lot of that like small-minded mentality. A lot of people move here because it feels safe to be who you are. Like, I remember that's one of the things that attracted me to moving here in the first place, because I remember we came down for a school trip and I was sitting on Cuba Street, and I remember just seeing like this person who was just like ridiculously dressed, and nobody was like looking at them differently. Like, everyone was just like, oh, you know, as you were,
like the saxophone player in the bush.
What a
absolutely,
icon.
Just like Wellington icon,
100%.
100%.
Yeah, I love him.
I love that.
I've got him on speaker. legit.
Had a good time.
You begin to appreciate people like him, like, because like times are pretty rough, and there's a bit of a vibe at the moment that everyone's like just kicking Wellington at the moment. So those special parts, like the Wellington Tree Man, Woody the Tree, or like King Homeboy that's like freestyling on the street, like those are the things that like I feel like we need to like
keep
hold on to. For the spirit and for that energy. So
I was wondering what they were gonna do with that massive space next to this building. Like, there's like it looked like they knocked an earthquake building or something. There's this massive area. I was like, either community garden or like
you mean the Tamathas building that burnt down?
Oh, not the one up there. There's like literally, if you go down here and turn left, there's like a massive hole in the where there used to be a building. I don't know what used to be there, but it was like, I think it was earthquake prone or something. But yeah, I wonder what that space would be used for, you know. But
there's lots of spaces that we definitely need in our city, like community spaces,
absolutely. And ways, I think like places to platform the arts as well, and like celebrate those sorts of contributions in so many different ways. I think like that's also one of the things that this government is kind of going after at the moment. It's like all the arts funding among many other things. And it's just like, why? Like, we kind of need those as like really human parts of this equation, you know?
And just like I feel like the Central Library being closed has like been quite detrimental to the city, because there aren't many places that you can just go and be that doesn't require you to like spend money. And that's something that like I'm hearing quite a lot, is people want those like third spaces that you can just go in and be there, be safe, and spend time in your city without having to like, I don't know, buy a coffee or buy something to eat, like just those like third spaces.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And in terms of those third spaces, like there's like school, and there's like work, and then there's sport, and then there's like, if you do extracurriculars, then there's those things. But if you're not linked into any of those things, then it's really hard to link into those sorts of things. Would you have any advice on how, like, making those things more accessible for like refugee or migrant communities, in terms of like ways to build into that sort of social cohesion or other activities?
Yeah, one thing that I've been thinking for a really long time is that it would be amazing if Wellington had like a refugee welcome centre. And I know that's something that Beiru's Buchani has been advocating for a while, and especially in his most latest book, is that those centres are so important. And I'm pretty sure there's only one in Tamaki Makaurau, but Wellington is so diverse and there are so many different cultures and ethnicities here that I feel like that is something that we should look to as a space. But I think also when the Central Library reopens, that's going to be really important. I know lots of different communities use that space because you don't have to pay anything to go, and you can do your research, use the computers, do your printing, all of that kind of stuff, but just be in community.
Yeah, that whole hub, like when it was running, it was like such a thriving part of the city for so many different reasons. Yeah.
I also feel like our community centres play a really big role as well, in terms of just making things a lot more accessible to different communities and giving those opportunities for connection. Because I think that's the thing that I get nervous about in like our like kind of concrete jungle cities, is that sometimes in the fast-paced nature of things we don't make the space to be able to connect. So yeah, I think our community centres are just so important for that.
I think Takina is a great example of that has just opened up and has been like having so many different events and the diversity. We attend Festival for the Future as often as possible. That's a great part of the year. But yeah, those spaces to collaborate and figure it out together, I think, are really important.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that between all of us, we've got all the right tools and answers and questions that we need. We just need to figure out ways to all pool our resources.
Yeah, because I think that's kind of been one thing that so for people that don't know, I was a city councillor for 4 years, and the big conversation we've been having as a city, I think, is like trying to reinforce this idea that the central city and like our city is for people. It's not just a vehicle for like businesses or people to make money. It's also a space for connection, for creativity, for socializing, to break down walls around loneliness and kind of increase that diversity. So that's definitely been one, like, I guess, big theme that I guess definitely I've been trying to push, is that like our city is ours, and that we need those spaces all around our city, and especially in the central city, that help us to connect and help to facilitate those opportunities for connection.
Absolutely. And like the more that happens, the better the whole system gets. And it's like a self-reinforcing feedback loop that like keeps getting better and better. Like the better, the more we upgrade our tools, the more we can do, and that just feeds out. The more people we can include into that process, the more we can build out.
In terms of policy and things like that, how do you see the role of government in kind of building that social cohesion that you're talking about, and kind of creating an accessible future for kind of all people to be able to connect and thrive, as you say?
Oh, the big questions of the universe, eh? I think government's got a whole like range of tools to be able to facilitate that a bit more. I think probably just giving community organisations and artists like resourcing. That's what, I think that's probably the thing that I hear the most, is the key organisations in our community that I don't know, like do like preventative services or like offer services to our community. They're just so chronically underfunded, and then same with artists, too. Like it's really tough to be an artist because you don't have that like regular stream of income, and like there's the issues of like studio spaces and stuff like that. So I feel like the government can and should do a lot to facilitate creativity and to support community-based initiatives and artists and stuff like that to be able to. But I mean, I don't know, it could go really broad with that question, but I think that's a good starting place. Yeah,
Definitely.
I feel like the kaupapa for livable cities that kind of the Green Party stands for, and that you believe in, I think offers a lot in terms of that. And I remember a friend telling me said about most cities where artists thrive the most, and it was linked to lower rents of artists doing well where rents are low. So I think a lot of these issues are interrelated between sort of housing and community flourishing and cost of living in those spaces where people can connect and thrive. So it'd be interesting to see what we can do to
most of Wellington's issues like come back to housing, like and I'm not saying that because I'm biased because that's my like area, but from my experience, especially in the last couple of years, all of our issues always come back to housing and how expensive the rent is in the city. Like whether that's your like teachers that we can't bring in because they can't afford to live here, or like your nurses at the hospital, bus drivers, waste truck drivers, like every critical service that we rely on as a society. Most of the people that do that mahi can't afford to live here, and it just creates so many issues for our city. So that's why a big part of my advocacy has been like we need more housing, we need good public housing, and you know we just need a lot more affordable housing because the rent is just way too high in our city. Yeah,
the infrastructure in Wellington is a really interesting part of it. Yeah, I've heard in a few different places that like some of the Wellington City Council plans are like to prepare 30,000 people coming into the city, right? And there's so many factors part of those sorts of decisions, right? Like housing is super important, but then all of the other supporting infrastructure like waste management, water, hospital, teachers, schools, all the rest of it needs to scale as well. And it's like, is all of that wraparound being done, or is it mostly economic metrics that are like prioritizing these things? I don't know, where would you place those priorities?
Well, you're kind of completely right that in like planning for the future, we have to think about all of the different things that people need. And I guess that's one of the really hard things about this government is that they're not really like looking ahead to the future and not setting up our systems to accommodate a growing population. So for example, schools in Wellington, that's a big like kaupapa for me is like visiting the schools and seeing the state of those schools. If more people knew the state of our schools, they would be pretty upset by it. You know, it's quite common to go to a primary school where the roof is leaking all over the computers. The kids are all squeezed into these tiny little classrooms. The buildings are earthquake prone. We saw that with Wellington Girls College. Wellington High School's in the same situation. Karori West Primary School out in Karori, that the schools themselves are falling apart. And then you've got the hospital where there's like huge wait times. The staff are under pressure. They're not able to hire the staff that they need. And then obviously we all know about the pipes and how those are just bursting all over the place because they've been underinvested in for so long. Most of our problems as a city come from a combination of things. Usually it's either a history of underinvestment. So politicians for a long time have promised people low rates and have underinvested in our critical infrastructure. But then you also have governments like the ones that we have who will not invest in those critical public services, but will give all of the money to, you know, tax cuts for landlords. So like it's really a matter of priority and just kind of pushing the fact that austerity or trying to save money to give more money to the wealthy, that the result of that is that our public services that we rely on, our schools, our hospitals, our roads, all of that decay away. So, yeah.
I think it's really hard for those parts of society that to have to compete, particularly in a business context. Like all of those services that are not, like all of those social services are kind of forced to operate like a business, and like it puts so much pressure and distraction onto their workload. Like hospitals and universities, I think are a pretty interesting example to point to of like they have to try and facilitate the business side of it so much to justify the operation, but they kind of miss the point of like universities should be a fountain of knowledge and inspiration and connection and innovation, all of those things. But like the fact that it's run like a business is just such a limiting framework for it, and it is so much measured. The success and profiling of all of that is on economic metrics, and I feel like there's just always more ways to measure those sorts of things.
Yeah, and that's neoliberalism and that's capitalism, really, is that it's turned everything into an opportunity to make money as opposed to what it should be, which is like housing, for example, should be treated as a human right, not as a business. Healthcare like should be something that you can rely on no matter who you are, where you come from, or how much money you have. Like you should be able to walk into a hospital and get the care that you need. And I feel like as a country we've like been pretty good at treating all of those things like our basics, like public schools, public healthcare, public housing really well, but I'm scared that we're moving into a time where we're getting quite like Americanized in that we're trying to charge people for healthcare, charge people to go to school, charge people for an education,
For legal advice or assistance or any of that.
Yeah, exactly. Just trying to make people pay up, and which is really hard because most people don't have money, especially not at the moment. So, yeah.
And kind of ignoring other ways that they might be paying for it, either in their time or their social output or other metrics. It's just money has such a loud priority. I see it's a part of the system and it's got its place, but I feel like it breaches its banks a lot of the time in terms of the perspectives that it weighs in on.
Yeah, and like, especially for people of refugee backgrounds that come into the country, they don't know how to navigate these systems, like the healthcare system, schooling system. So how do you think that the government could better address these issues that refugee people like face when they come here? And do you think it's being addressed enough? And if not, why?
If I'm completely honest, I don't think the government is has the best interests of particularly like ethnic communities in mind. A lot of the mahi that we do at my electorate office is supporting people with like issues around like immigration or housing and stuff like that. So I think we're a bit of a touch point for a lot of people, but most of the people that we're supporting are usually people from refugee and migrant backgrounds who are like getting in touch for us to help them with like reunification work and stuff like that, or finding housing. And that's really special. But I think people, like all people, but also people that come here for a brighter future shouldn't have to rely on their local MP to get the basics.
Definitely.
Like they should just be supported to have the basics, whether that's a really like a warm, safe, dry roof over their head, whether it's being paid the living wage at their job, whether it's any support that they need to just, I guess, have the basics, whether that's like the schools that their kids go to or anything like that. Like that should be the basics, and that should be like pretty easy things for people to sort out, but it's not easy at all. And but I will also just say, like, I think one really cool thing about Wellington in particular is that our schools, and especially our primary schools, are some of the most diverse schools in this country.
Definitely.
Like Mount Cook School, Te Aro School, like we're talking like 100 different like ethnicities, like lots of different language being spoken. And I would like that to be something that Wellington is more known for, like just the cultural richness that we have here and that we celebrate. Being like an inclusive and diverse city and community. But there's a lot the government could do to just make the transition more easy, like make it easier. And also just to support people who are experiencing trauma, because a lot of people have come from places that are just traumatic. Like some of the stories that I hear when people walk into our office, just where they've come from, the things they've seen, the things they've experienced, the war, the death, all of the genocide, all of that. People, there's a lot of trauma out there too. And so that's another part of the story is like how do we make people feel safe and welcome here, make sure that they've got the basics, but also that they know that like we care and want them to like feel safe, you know? Yeah.
That kind of refugee community hub idea sounds like a really interesting way to pull all of those sort of platforms together. Like have the info streams, have the kōrero spaces, have the I think unpacking all the trauma and those international dialogues are really important. Like how do we better understand each other's experiences and what we've been through on so many different levels of that equation, like from a migrant and refugee context to like a different school upbringing context. Like I think there's a kind of perception that we've all got within a ballpark of a similar experience, but until you actually go and see that and learn more about it, that's like it's not the case.
Like there are heaps of really awesome organizations like that do a lot of that support work, like Changemakers and voiceofaroha. BGI is another good space. Like there's quite a few active organisations in Pōneke that like are doing a lot of that mahi. So maybe it's not a new thing like a refugee welcome centre or something, but maybe it's more like coordination and like for the council and government to be able to like get behind some of these community organisations rather than us trying to like reinvent the wheel, you know?
Have you had a chance to check out the new youth hub on Willis Street?
Yes.
It's so cool. And like sometimes like I go in and there's like so many people just using the space, like lots of diverse like people and interests and everything. It's so great to see, and it's like it really captures like what Wellington is all about and bringing, you know, that sense of community in it. I think it's really cool.
It's another really good example of like a third space that people can just go and be and just chill
Do
out
whatever,
and be safe too.
Definitely.
Like I think that's the big thing is like hanging out on the street. Like you see the young people like on Cuba Street, and that like is not the safest place to be sometimes. So having those safe spaces for people to go
important.
is really important. So I also kind of want to acknowledge that like Wellington in general is a really accepting and like welcoming place, but there's also like still quite a bit of racism and discrimination. Like I quite often get contacted by people who have like just been on the bus and been subject to like Islamophobia or racism or discrimination. So like that, I don't want to make it out like Wellington is perfect and we've still got a long way to go. But I think on balance, like we've got the right attitude, but we need to like back that up with like having good services and good basics.
Definitely, I think that's really important, especially like a lot of our young people are really like interested in politics and everything, but you hear like, oh, I don't really care about politics or politics doesn't really affect me, but people are talking about rents and public transport and housing. That's politics, like it affects them without them even knowing. And I feel like so many young people are actually like interested, but they don't know how to get involved. They don't know what differences that they can make as young people. We just kind of feel voiceless, especially with the new government in charge. Like, what is your advice to these young people who are just feeling really helpless and like there's nothing they can do?
Well, I think you're right. Everything is political, and it might not be like party political or like parliament political, but everything is like so political. And like even though I get really upset by the decisions that the government is making, I also think that this is a time, like when you have governments like this is a time where there's just unreal resistance. Definitely. Like you have the artists going hard, like all the activists are getting in there, protesting, marching, like people sort of wake up to their power. And so although it's like times are really hard, I feel like these times are super like mobilizing and energetic. That's kind of been the main thing that I've been focusing on too, because I feel like when times are like this, people can go one of two ways. They can either be like really mobilized and want to like get out on the streets and make their voices heard, or they can also like go down the pathway of disengaging, checking out, being like, it's all too big, it's too hard, nothing I do matters, like doesn't matter, I'm gonna give up. And so most of our mahi has been trying to drive people towards the like mobilise and
Mobilising,
give people opportunities to get involved. So like this community hui on
Definitely.
Sunday, that's a way that if people are like, I don't agree with what this government's doing around te tiriti,
Yeah.
you know, they can show up. They don't have to pay anything to be there. There'll be kai. They can learn about like how to make a submission, how if you want to come along to the big march, you can come along, like just an opportunity to learn and engage. But yeah, I feel like the next few years, definitely, there's going to be so many opportunities for people to get involved on issues that they care about, whether that's joining like a, I don't know, a protest against the fast track bill or the protest against, there's going to be a lot of protests.
Of course, yeah.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. I think a lot of young activists will be able to really like cut their teeth over the next few years and learn the basics of how to build power in our communities and how to translate that into political change. Because when we get back into government, I feel like we need to do all the groundwork now so that when we get in there, we can just go hard, like not muck around, trying to like consult and figure everything out. Just get in there and do it. Yeah, not waste time, just get in there and do it. But we have to build that power now while we're in opposition, you know? Things like wealth taxes, things like building more public housing, things that might have been seen controversial once, but like that we have to do. But we have to build up that mandate first and now, I think.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. And speaking of building power, would you mind like talking to that transition between university and workforce and like how you build your power to like enter or like scale once you graduate? Because I think a lot of people like do the degree and then are kind of expecting either more opportunities or different opportunities or like other pathways, but don't necessarily know how to like, I don't know, scale those building blocks or like scale that momentum as you
like for political change,
or like as you, well, I suppose like in terms of like professional development, like how do you keep lining up those blocks to keep developing and keep scaling your experience, or like from uni to
I don't really know because I just went straight from uni to city council, so like I don't know, it hasn't been like a conventional pathway. So I don't know, it's kind of hard because I think for a lot of people the jobs just aren't there when they finish, and we're kind of living in a time where having a degree doesn't necessarily guarantee you a job. And that's not like a flaw in the people that have like graduated, that's a flaw in the system, in that
which jobs are available.
Exactly. And like, well, I mean 7,000 people have just lost their job in the public service, so there aren't many jobs out there. And like people that I don't know want to be like teachers or nurses, like they don't really pay very well in New Zealand, so like a lot of people are just going overseas because they're like, why would I stay here if I'm going to get paid minimum wage and have a really difficult job, you know? So it's hard to give advice when I think we've got a really like hostile work environment at the moment.
It's a weird time, eh? Like especially on the back of COVID, it's like there's heaps of demand in some areas and like there's way more, like the dynamics are whacked out in other areas of the workforce. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. There's so much we could keep kōreroing about. How much time do we have?
Cool.
All right.
Well, I just wanted to like bring to light one of the more like important issues as well around like te tiriti, and there's been lots of conversations about that. So could you tell us how we could have more open conversations about te tiriti while still like respecting its significance and everything that it holds, and how it's not really currently being respected the way it should right now, especially
Totally. That's a good question. I think particularly I've really loved seeing, there's been quite a few different community hui around Aotearoa, and I've loved to see tauiwi perspectives about te tiriti. Because to be honest, like I kind of already know like what Māori think about te tiriti, and like we kind of know what like some Pākehā voices think about te tiriti, but I'm more like interested in like people who have come from different places, what their perspective on te tiriti is. So I've been really enjoying hearing those different perspectives. Because at the end of the day, te tiriti is the basis by which we can all stand on this land. No matter like where you come from, where you were born, what language you speak, te tiriti is that safeguard for all of us.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been the big thing that that we've been trying to do, is to show that te tiriti isn't just about Māori. It's not just about iwi or hapu or any of that, and it's not just about Pākehā either. It's about the like multicultural nation that we have today, and making sure that everybody can stand in Aotearoa, you know.
Definitely.
So it's really important, and it's been really hard to watch these politicians just totally trampling on our history and on the mana of the treaty, and just trying to rewrite history really, and erase its mana in general. So obviously this government has decided that they'll erase te tiriti from more than 40 pieces of legislation, and I just think they're trying to divide us. Like, I think, put simply, they're trying to divide us, and for us to have a big, a really divisive conversation, because they want people to believe that te tiriti is only about Māori, but it's about all of us.
Yeah.
And so I think the only antidote to that is to those kind of malicious politicians that want to divide us. I think the only thing we can do is to build power in our community. So one thing that I'm excited for our hui on Sunday is that we'll have like tauiwi perspectives, so people that talking about what te tiriti means to them. And I feel like the more we can do that, the more we can reflect on that significance. That's a better antidote than to be like fighting, try and fight the government, because we're never going to beat them at their own game, because they want to divide us. And the perfect antidote for that is for us to come together and I guess fight for it together as something that we all have a place in.
Collective action,
as opposed to it just being like a Māori issue, you know.
That's a really inspiring way of thinking about and talking about kind of these collective responses. I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit to that. I think also the kind of collective ways that we can imagine kind of really beautiful, inclusive and livable futures together, and if you had any particular points on how you see that being possible in the future with climate change, and how we can kind of talking to all the kind of the basic human rights that we've kind of been talking about, and how we can kind of address that to create but not only a planet but also an Aotearoa that is accessible, that is livable, that is affordable, that is for everyone.
I think like just the opportunities for us to come together as a community and to imagine what that world looks like are so critical. And I don't think that's a conversation that can or should be led by politicians. Like, I think that's something that we create for ourselves, whether that's like artists putting out like music and painting and photography and poetry and books that shows us what the future could look like. And like, I think it sounds a bit airy-fairy, but we don't often make space to imagine what that world could look like, because we're so often fighting back against what we see as the immediate threat. But what that does is it means we have less time to imagine the world that we're fighting for. But I feel like hope is more galvanizing than fear. And like, in order to move towards that future, we kind of have to know what it looks like. You know?
I was just thinking those are like the two parts of it. Like, there's the designing what point B looks like, and then traveling from point A to point B. And like, how do we get there with inheriting all of these dynamics and infrastructures that we've already got? How do we move those forward? It's a really interesting and complex question. There's so many layers to that.
But you got to know where you're going, eh? Like, because if we put all our energies into resistance, like resistance is important, and sometimes it's so necessary for survival, like that resistance, but it doesn't give us the opportunity to like know where we're going to. And so I think being able to show like what Aotearoa could look like in a society that is truly inclusive, that is that genuinely like puts the environment at the center of everything, as opposed to treating the environment as a resource that we can degrade and make money from. Showing what our community could look like if everybody had access to the basics, if everybody had a house, if everybody had good schooling, good healthcare, all of those basics. Like trying to paint that world is, I think, the challenge ahead of us, but is the critical part to getting there.
If we can answer that question, that's a golden answer right there. And I think that really cuts our work out for us, for sure.
I think we know though, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like most people know like what they want to see. Maybe that's just like a Wellington view of things, but I feel like people kind of already know that the way we're going at the moment is not sustainable. We can't keep exploiting people and the planet. Like, to put it simply, we just can't, because it's unsustainable and everything is going to collapse around us by choice or by the force of nature. So like,
she's going to win that one.
Oh yeah, she is going to win that one. Exactly. So now it's almost a matter of like, there's some damage has been done. We can prevent further, chaos from happening, but we need like the willpower to do that. And we've got to almost negotiate now. We're at a negotiation period where it's like, okay, we know the water's coming. We know the weather is going to change. So how are we going to, like, first of all, stop destroying the environment? And second of all, how are we going to live with the changes that are inevitably going to happen because of our actions? Yeah.
And I really like the whole people over profit thing. I think that's so important. And I loved everything you talked about in terms of community. And that's such a big part. It's like everything. Community is everything.
Yeah.
How would you say that we can build more climate resilient communities?
I think like connected communities that where like people are talking to each other and supporting each other is probably the big thing. Because if people are like, let's say, living like in Ōwhiro Bay or like Island Bay or something, and they're, hit by these massive storm surges, and that's going to increase. Like if people feel that they're on their own, they're going to like, and they're scared, they're going to like go kind of be quite isolated. Whereas in times of challenges, that's when it's even more important for us to be connected and to be supporting one another. So I think the connection is vital, but also making sure that those communities can determine what their future looks like. So you don't have like the government or politicians coming in being like, all right, you all need to move, like really like those communities have to be in charge. But also I think the big thing that we neglect in the whole climate conversation is that the people with the least resources who have contributed the least to climate change are the ones who will be affected first and most devastatingly.
Definitely.
And so that's always got to be front of mind as well, that there's a just transition that actually takes into account the fact that people in South Auckland, people in South Wellington, people in South Dunedin, all of those communities that live in the low-lying areas that are going to be hammered by climate change.
Already this week.
Yeah, exactly. Like, those are the communities that we need to be supporting first and foremost, because they have the least resource to weather what is going to inevitably happen because of our actions, not theirs. It's like the actions of, I guess, greedy corporate interests that have exploited the planet for so long and polluted it so much.
And that historical influence as well, This has been building for a long time, and I think it's also part of the social work we have to do to kind of unpack and slow down that, is that we're inheriting this enormous amount of social momentum that is, and historical momentum that has helped build everything the way it is.
Thank you so much for bringing so many important issues to the table, for sharing your thoughts and insights, and for bringing a lot of hope as well. I think that's really, really important in these conversations.
Hope galvanizes fear.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you so much. It's been an amazing conversation, and I'm sure our audience will have a lot to think about and to take away, as well as hopefully to take part and participate, whether it's in the hikoi, as you say, or to get more involved and continue researching and what they want the future of their world to be like. So thank you so much for coming on, and we really, really appreciate your time.
Ngā mihi ki te kōrero.
And go to the community hui on Sunday.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. And we have one more kind of special thing. So we have a guest book.
Oh,
and so
cool.
basically, all of our previous guests, we get them to write a message to the new guest. It's like a question as well.
Oh,
And so we
okay.
have a question to ask you, and then we would ask you to write another question for our next guest.
Oh, cool.
Kind of
Okay.
cool. So our question that we have for you is, are you living your dream life? And if so, why? If not, why not?
Oh,
Big one.
am I living my dream life? That's a hard one because, like, on the one hand, it's like, it's quite a dream to wake up
Surreal,
every morning and be like, what
Yeah.
issue am I gonna go hard on
Tackle
today?
yeah.
But then,
You're right on the forefront of it.
yeah, and also not really happy with the some of the things that are happening at the moment. So,
There's also a fair amount out of your court.
yeah. Oh, that's a hard one. Yeah.
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 Just half and half.
Yeah, half and half, yeah.
Not so bad.